This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. My new book about addictions, All the Way Home, Building Recovery That Works. Well, our customary obsession with real estate got knocked off the front pages recently by our current pot fiasco, and we covered some of that last week. We'll come back and revisit that in 2 weeks' time. I can hear thousands screaming hooray. But now let's go back to one of the favorite Lower Mainland discussions. Oh, have you sold your building? Oh, how much did you get? Well, you're moving to where? Venezuela? Yeah, good luck. So what do we really have in mind with this city? We have planners. They've become rock stars, actually. But do we really have plans? Do we really know what we're doing? Or is it all a big accident? Or is it all because of offshore investment? Who knows? Well, Anne McMullin must know because she's with the Urban Development Institute, and she has her finger on this pulse. Great to see you, Anne. Just before we get into the meat and potatoes here, just give us a sentence or two about Urban Development Institute.
Oh, well, it's essentially like a trade organization. So we represent the commercial, residential, and industrial developers at all three levels of government. Also in terms of education, educating our members about current trends in the industry, and also from a technical and policy perspective, and then also from a communications perspective to do things just like this.
Yeah, I've been at a couple of your events, and they're really interesting. Mm-hmm. So you wrote a marvelous op-ed in the Sun the other day in which you said, look, people and profits are not at each other's throats, that in fact you can't build for profit or non-profit. In any case, you can't build without people in mind, and people need a good economy.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And
what prompted you to write that piece?
Well,
it was a terrific piece.
Well, thank you. I think that it had prompted from an earlier article that I had seen that said we should be building for people, not profits. And
yes.
And we hear a lot about the lack of affordability, the lack of jobs, our low wages in relation to the rest of the country. And really what I said is we can build for profit and for the people, and I think those two have to go hand in hand. In order to continue to build, you've got to do it at a rate that makes enough money that you can continue to build again. So, they're for a strong economy, to have good jobs, and for a place to live, the two are absolutely linked. Yeah,
you have to keep them together. Let's look at some specifics. The Cambie Corridor, of course, has been a headline story for years, beginning with building the tunnel and wrecking people's business and all that jazz. And we've covered that a lot. Now, I think many of us find ourselves looking at Marine Drive and seeing this hub. And it's kind of fascinating, for my taste, a little spooky, but maybe it's a wonderful thing, I don't know. Here, we have this idea, which isn't new to Vancouver, that every time you get a metro stop, or whatever we're calling these things, a subway stop, we should build up around it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what, sort of the term is transit-oriented development, and that's what particularly people who are moving into multifamily, townhome, is to live near the transportation hubs.
Yes.
To live far out in the suburbs and commute in, if you're out into the Fraser Valley, that can cost you almost an extra $20,000 a year in maintaining a car and gas and repairs and that sort of thing.
Right.
So more and more we're seeing in urban centers, people want to live around transit hubs. And that's where the development is occurring. So it's really based on demand. The Marine Gateway project, I think what you're speaking of at Cambie and Marine, When the first one went on sale a number of years ago, it sold out in 24 hours. So you just see that there's the demand for it.
It's sold out in 24 hours.
That's right. So,
my goodness.
Yeah, and that's why, again, the city is seeing planning along the Cambie corridor because people, again, want to live near a transportation network. It's convenient, it's good for the environment, it's efficient, you're not fighting in traffic, dealing with parking, gas, and all the other issues that go along with that.
Something in my notes said to me this morning that we have an extraordinarily low number of townhouses, for example. So I look at, what is that project called? Marine Gate? What?
Marine Gateway, yes.
Yeah,
down
Marine
at,
Gateway. So I look at that, and mostly what I see is this raging tower, and I wonder about something that, is a little lower, and because I really love townhouses. It's just a personal taste,
Yes, and I think when you look at a transit hub like Cambie and Marine, you will get essentially the towers. As well, from a sort of an engineering and planning perspective, there are very few stops along the Canada line.
Yes.
So you need to concentrate the density on those stops. If there are more stops, which they are proposing if the transit plebiscite goes ahead and we do get the funding from the federal government, that there are opportunities to create more stops. And then that spreads out the development because, again, to build along a line where you're still a 15-minute or 20-minute walk from a transit stop, then it just defeats the purpose of transit-oriented development. So that's why we get these sort of big, towers, say, the Burnaby node or at Cambie Corridor.
Yes.
Those aren't bad, but in order to get the sort of what we might call the gentle density, you do need more of those transit stops or more buses along that line.
And yet, we're doing something a little different at Oak Ridge, which is a transit stop on the same line, and that density is a little more squashed. It's not quite reaching into the clouds.
Right. Well, the Oak Ridge site is already developed, so you already have that footprint. So you're able to go up, there will be towers, and then have that density. So it's a large site, whereas the Marine Gateway site, it's a smaller site, so each developer needs to buy a single parcel of land, whereas that was owned largely by, owned by two developers essentially, West Bank and Oxford Properties. I think that's the right one. So they were able to come together, almost what they call a land assembly, but a very large. So it made it easier to create that like a town center. And you'll see that in Brentwood as well, out in Burnaby, and you'll start to see that a little bit in Park Royal in West Vancouver, where malls are being transformed into little urban centers, not just a mall where you drive your station wagon, park, shop, get out, and then drive. And so again, that's what it's creating.
What's that wonderful development only about 10 blocks east of Boundary on Hastings, or 15 blocks? I really like that area.
The Brentwood, is that the one you mean?
No. On East Hastings. It's got there's a Safeway, there's a London Drugs, there's an Artigiano cafe. That looks to me livable. I'm one of these guys who likes to walk to my corner grocer. I like to walk to the drugstore and so on. I've been very lucky in most of my life. I've been able to do that.
Right. And I think, people often ask us, why don't you build more townhomes? We'd love to build more townhomes and low-rise because there's a market for every housing type. But right now, between, say, the Marine Gateway area, that's Cambie and Marine, and the downtown core, the zoning doesn't allow for that. So right now it's zoned single family, and to try to bring about change is very, very difficult, understandably so, because it's changing a traditional neighborhood. But as the population increases, which it is, and people want to live in the downtown core, there's only 47,000 single-family homes in the city of Vancouver. Yet there's 500, 600,000 people live here. Not everybody, unfortunately, can have a single-family home, and as more people want to live close in the urban center, you do need to have more density. So I think the city of Vancouver is doing a good job in the Cambie corridor. It's slow, where we're getting that mid to low rise. And then the Cambie 3, which is going on the outer areas, we'll see more townhomes, stacked townhomes, and more of the kind of thing you're talking about.
You mentioned land assembly, and that also got in the news over the last 24 hours or 48 hours, and rightly so. I mean, I was in City Gate, is that what it's called? The 12th, no.
Cambie, near City Hall?
I had to go to City Hall to pick up a document. So I went in to get some groceries. And there was the sales office for, I forget the name of the project, but it's at 33rd and Cambie. And it's an apartment. It's 3 apartment buildings. Runs, I think, from 29th to 33rd. And it's quite beautiful.
6-story or so, or
Yeah, but it's not a gift. I mean, we're looking 900,000 for under 900 square feet.
Right.
You know, and it's got all the usual toys, which we expect from any modern new building. But that's not suddenly a gift to everyone who thought they couldn't afford a home.
Oh, heavens no.
I mean, it's a little pricey.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're not growing our land base.
Yes.
And the supply of housing coming onto the market
Yes.
is below demand.
Yes.
So you're going to have, the prices are not going to go down. So that's just your basic supply and demand. And, and it's a tough, it's difficult, but the people talk about the high price of homes. I think there was something in the paper the other day about this tiny home that sold for 1.35.
Right.
But if you look at the land value, it essentially went for close to land value. I mean, it does seem that it's the house, but it's, you're looking at $300, $400 a square foot of land in the city, in the city.
So I use Granville Street quite a lot. South Granville, I mean, heading towards the airport, and I have other reasons to go out in that direction and so on. And there are lots of pieces of what look like assembly projects. You'll see entire blocks of houses up for sale by the same agent and so on. And of course, we have development. We have all kinds of development, not just Walls, Shannon Mews, which is a very interesting development, but we've got places across the street, we've got places, So the land assembly thing is an interesting, complicated issue. I live in a building at 14th and Granville, and I've already been approached 3 times by one agent who would like me to take a kind of, it's like a reverse mortgage. I don't know what he calls it.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, but he wants to buy me out, but I can still live there for 5 or 10 years.
Living interest or something, or 10-year interest, or whatever it might be.
Something like that. And why does he want that? Because he thinks that I will be the thin edge of the wedge, and then everybody in my building will sell, and he can tear down my building and build.
Right, and I'm not no disrespect to real estate agents, but the developers, certainly the developers that I represent, they know the market, and they also know the zoning, and they know the community plans. You'll notice perhaps along Granville, those homes have been for sale for quite some time and have not sold, because the city has been very clear and said, these are going to be maintained as single-family homes. So no developer has come in and bought those, knowing.
So how did the other ones get built?
Well, the ones on Canby.
I'm talking about on Granville.
That was
not just Shannon, but there are other ones.
Those would have been areas where there could have been zoning, but for that most part, in that certain section, the zoning. Now, perhaps the realtor says, "Well, I'll buy it now.
Yes.
You live in it for 10 years, and maybe in 10 years from now, he's banking on the idea that it could be rezoned in 10 to 15 years. That's a risk. That's a gamble, and that's not what we do in our industry. And as far as the people that I represent, we're the developers. We certainly have to look at the land use plans. We know how difficult it is.
Right. We've got 1 minute.
Sure.
We've got 1 minute to break. Can you explain to the good folks who are watching this, why is there a break boundary on Alma Road? All along Kitts, let's say 7th and 8th Avenue, from Arbutus right to Alma, we have duplexes and triplexes, and they're marvelous, and they're not cheap. I mean, they were at some point reasonably reasonable, but they're all $1 million each, even a triplex.
Right.
But you get to Alma Road, and I used to live west of Alma Road until recently. I sold my house. No way. No one will allow a duplex. And I look at a piece of a corner lot going down, and I say to myself, boy, if I had the money, I'd like to build a quadruplex. Is that right?
Yeah.
I'd like to build 4 apartments, 2 up, 2 down.
Right.
They wouldn't let me, would they?
Are you asking would the residents let you, or the city would let you?
Both.
That's a difficult question.
But even if it weren't my money, even if it weren't a profit for me, I think that's a good idea.
So do I.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. We'll take a break.
It's a very good idea.
We'll take a break and come back and find out why. All right, Anne McMullin is our guest with the Urban Development Institute, and we're talking about Vancouver's favorite subject, property. An opportunity for you to send us an email at davidberner.com. Always happy to hear from you until we're not. Also, it's an opportunity for those lovely folks who support us here to say hello on Shaw, Community Television Cable 4. Back in just a moment.
This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors: the Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. My new book about addictions, All the Way Home, Building Recovery That Works.
Shows you how things change. I was just telling our guest, Anne McMullin, that when I first moved into the house that I sold a few years ago, there was an elderly fellow at my door with a petition complaining about the development of the townhouses at 8th and Sassamat. Mm-hmm. And I said to him, sir, that's going to have underground parking. It's expensive enough. It's not going to be all drug dealers. It's going to be ordinary folks. And I think it's an amenity. I think it's a positive for our neighborhood, so leave me alone.
Yeah.
How do we convince people? I have a good friend who's a lawyer, and he lives in the Dunbar area, and I think he's pretty adamant about keeping Dunbar a single-family neighborhood.
If I had that answer, it would be worth a lot. It's very difficult, and I also respect that the communities like those, they're sort of older, traditional. It's how they've lived there for 30 years, and they don't want change. And I think that human nature for many is that they don't like change. And I think there's also a lot of people who do want change, and it does take time, and we do see that where I even notice it in my own sort of cohort peer group and people younger, that they want to live in a smaller space, have a smaller footprint, maybe not be mowing the back lawn and the front lawn, that they actually want the smaller home. So that's sort of that 1950s, 60s, the big 3,000 square foot suburban home. And now we are starting to see the shift. So it will take time, but we do see it. I mean, you point out, say, Dunbar, and I think we have to remember that this region is large and there's 2.5 million people, and we are seeing change in many other communities. We certainly see a huge mix of housing in Coquitlam, even in North Vancouver, in the city of North Van.
Yes, for sure.
The low-rise, the duplexes, the high-rises, Burnaby, a mix. So there are communities that see the opportunities and the advantages, but as well, as I talked about, in the city of Vancouver, there's only 47,000 single-family lots. So as the demand or as the supply does go down, as some of the homes do become, duplexes, townhomes, the value of those single-family homes continues to go up. So the longer you hang on, it's to your advantage. So there's not really an incentive for somebody living in a single-family home unless they want to cash out at that time to allow for the duplex or fourplex in the neighborhood. So that's the struggle, unless you see the greater good, which a lot of people do. But I don't want to pick on Dunbar, but it is a small pocket. We see sort of the welcome change in other areas, as long as it's gentle and as long as it's understood and as long as it occurs sort of over time. And we've seen some mistakes, and I could point to those where plans have come in and I don't think done very well, and other area plans that are done very well, and then you see that kind of incremental change.
I want to talk for a minute, Anne, about the mid-rise versus the high-rise, and I want to show you a couple photographs I took recently of a project they're just finishing it off, cleaning it up and opening it up on Denman Street. There it is, Denman near Nelson, and they tore down the building, and as you can see, I was baffled by this. They put up a 2-story project. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying to myself, what happened to 5 stories? Because let's think about some specific strips, okay? Let's think about the Dunbar Shopping District, the 10th Avenue Shopping District, Commercial Drive, 4th Avenue. In my mind, all of those places, should be basically piece by piece, torn down and replaced by 5-story developments. The shops on the ground floor,
the doctors, lawyers, and accountants on the second floor, and 3 levels of residency. And we have a few, for example, right opposite the Safeway on 10th Avenue. There's a couple of those.
Yes.
But this is all over Europe for hundreds of years. People have lived this way very happily, successfully, you know. Why don't we have more of that? Is it too difficult to package it?
No, I think there's 2 things. It is, like I said, zoning, and a lot of it is community opposition. They want things the way that they are. That is a huge part of the inability to bring about change.
But in
that case, I mean, sometimes it's also the high cost of land because of the limited supply, that you do need to go a certain height in order to make it viable.
So why didn't they go higher? Why would the city let that? See,
specifically, I don't know. I know I don't know if that project, and I'd have to look it up, is part of the West End plan. But part of the West End plan actually does limit some new development along Denman and Davie in a couple of areas to the 2-story, so that it would go 2-story and then back, trying to retain the sort of the culture of the Denman-Davie area. Some of those things that we didn't agree with, but when they went around into the community and seeking input and saying, well, what would you like to see, and what are the amenities, and how high, how low, how much, how this, that's a lot of the decisions that were made. So you will actually, as the West End plan unfolds, you will actually see some very, very, very tall towers, partly in order to allow for the amenities and to retain some of the traditional look and feel of that West End. And so that's often why we see things like this. Now, that project specific, like I said, I don't know whether that's the start of something, and then it was, in terms of trade, well, I'll do 2 stories here, as long as I can do 20 stories here, because I can't do 2 stories here. I can't afford to, based on the land, unless I can make a profit.
I understand that,
so
but there's a kind of disconnect to a community that keeps hearing the word density thrown at it over and over and over again, and you have an opportunity to provide housing and so on, and you come up with 2 stories. And it's like, what are you, people kidding me?
I know. So, from our perspective, obviously, and like I said, people and profits, there's no shame in saying profits. The more density you have, for the most part, the more profit, just because you're selling more. It's not always the case. So probably the developer would have liked to have 3 or 4 stories. I don't know that case specifically, but generally, with high land costs, if you want to go, you really need to go 4 or 5 stories to even make it viable.
So recently, let's talk about planners, city planners specifically. In show business, there's a disconnect in showbiz, broadcast, and so on, between management and talent. There's always this war between management and talent, I should say. At Shaw, I haven't experienced this very much. People are very kind to me here. But certainly, it happens a lot. I keep reading and hearing about the disconnect between the kinds of people that are your folks at urban development, the builders, the designers, the architects, the construction people, so on, and city planners. I keep hearing about this disconnect. Oddly enough, the person who sort of has appointed himself as the unofficial city planner lives on an island, and he's always commenting on this. Is there a problem with city planning? I mean, do builders not have good access? Do they have to go through a hideous process to get something done?
Well, I would say that we have a good working relationship with the City of Vancouver and other municipalities and the planning department.
Yes.
But what you just said, is there a hideous process to go through? Absolutely, and I don't blame the planning departments for that.
And you're saying there has to be some process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Other municipalities, it's a lot more clear, with a lot more certainty and a lot more understanding. It is a very difficult process. And the new city planner that's come in Vancouver, he's been there maybe 2.5 years or so, he's trying to bring that clarity to planning, and we are seeing a lot of we're seeing a lot of improvements, but city halls are run by politicians. Understandably, that's our democracy, and often they're listening, and they should listening to the public that perhaps doesn't want the change that the city planning department is recommending. So no, we have great respect, but it is a very difficult job that they're doing, and it's a very difficult job that we have to navigate our way through.
One of the city councillors, who, in my opinion, sees xenophobia at every turn, is quick to panic and scream racism, if anybody talks about offshore money having a serious effect on Vancouver. And it seems to me this has nothing to do with racism. It's a simple fact of life that offshore money, particularly money from mainland China, it used to be from Hong Kong, but now from mainland China, has an enormous impact on what happens in Vancouver real estate.
Well, it has an enormous impact on the high-end single-family home, but the high-end single-family home doesn't have much impact on the condo market. The condo market is 90% immigrants, for people that live here, that have moved here. And of those, the condos or in the multifamily, I'd say condo, townhome, whatever it is, like I said, is largely either it's let's call it new Canadians.
Okay.
And so the $10 million or $5 million single family home doesn't actually affect that price of that's two very different markets. So in the single family home market, absolutely, there's a limited supply, and you get a lot of money pouring in, whether it's in the U.S., offshore, China. Pick your rich city or rich country, and that's where a lot of the money is going. In the condo market, because of it is, for the most part, people living here, working here, immigrating here, as well, a certain percentage, probably as high as 30% in some areas, of those condos that are purchased go back into the rental market. So it's local people buying a condo that they think, well, this is an opportunity for me to make a bit of money. So they go into the rental pool, and rents are restricted by income. So there's only so much income you can earn or to pay, rent you can pay based on your income. So that actually keeps condo prices at a certain level. I mean, obviously they're going to be expensive based on land costs. So it's a complex formula, but to say offshore money is affecting the general lower mainland, it is a small, very small, high-end part of the market that's being affected, not the general overall.
I have to say, honestly, I think you're wonderful, but I don't agree with you, and we're out of time. Yeah. So I think that's one that maybe we need to, that's a long conversation. It's complicated.
I mean, we're an international city. It's international money, not just in the real estate, but in all facets, whether it's business or, Shaw, I don't know, where's the money comes from all over the world. So we are a global economy, but I don't, anyway.
And thanks so much. We're out of here. Great to talk to you. Anne McMullin from the Urban Development Institute. All right, folks, next week a very specific issue, and that's the development at Little Mountain, or the lack of development, the displacement of people in public housing, and when will that get all cleaned up? Thank you for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you here again soon on Shaw Community Television Cable 4. Good night.